Although Linux distributions are free to organize the file system however they want, most follow the Linux file system hierarchy standard to some extent. The standard is intended to be a reference and not a rule. In this video, we are going to take a tour of some of the more important directories. Even if you aren't going to be an administrator, it is important to know how your system is organized. Remember, this is just a suggestion. Your distribution may differ. Since the standard is so important, there is a man page associated with it, even though it isn't a command. We can look at the standard using man HIER here. To help you understand how all these directories are related, we will use the GUI file manager to see how the directories are laid out hierarchically. Unlike Microsoft Windows, Linux doesn't use separate drive letters. Instead, all drives are organized under one directory structure starting at /. We will discuss how different drives are organized into this directory structure in a later video. The bin directory stores important executable programs. Some of the commands we have discussed in previous videos, such as more and less, are stored there. The boot directory contains all the files needed to boot the system, such as the Linux kernel. These files are usually managed by the system, so you probably won't need to modify any of them. The only exception would be if you dual boot your computer with another operating system and need to modify the bootloader. The dev directory is an interesting one. All of the files in this directory and its subdirectories aren't really files. They are actually devices. If you look at the input subdirectory, you will find a file associated with your mouse. You can even find special devices called standard out, standard in, and standard error. We will discuss these more in a later video. Unless you know what you are doing, I highly recommend that you don't play around in this directory, as you could easily cause significant problems. The etc directory is where most configuration files for the system are kept. We will discuss some of them in later videos. These configuration files are mostly simple text files, even if they don't have a .text file extension. While you probably won't modify these files often, there are times where it will be necessary, so it is important to be familiar with what is in there. As you know by now, the home directory contains the personal directories of all users. The lib directory contains libraries needed for programs to run. This is another one of those directories that is important to know about if you need to troubleshoot a problem, but shouldn't need to use in most cases. The media directory is used as a mount point for removable storage devices like USB drives or DVDs. We will discuss how this works in a later video. The mount directory is also a mount point for temporary file systems. Before the media directory was added to the standard, this was the directory where USB drives and DVDs were mounted. The opt directory is used for software that isn't installed using the distribution's package management system. I've used it for things like custom utilities and the official Java development kit. The directory can be seen by all users, so installing software that there means it is accessible to everyone. The proc directory is like the dev directory. The files in the directory aren't really files. Rather, they represent information for every running process. The subdirectories and files are used by the system, and you shouldn't need to do anything with them. The directory root is the home directory of the root user. For security purposes, it isn't in the home directory, and we can't access it. The sbin directory is like the bin directory we previously discussed. The difference is that commands in the sbin directory are usually only executed by the superuser root. Regular users don't normally use these commands. The temp directory contains temporary files used by the system. I frequently use it in my scripts as a place to store files I only need for a moment. Note that the contents of this directory can be deleted at any time. I frequently see it cleaned out when the system boots. Because it is so volatile, don't use it to store anything important. The user directory is an important one. There aren't any files in the directory itself, but it contains a number of important subdirectories. The directory user bin contains a number of important commands. These aren't needed to ensure the system starts, so they aren't in bin, but they are still important and commonly used. Most of the commands we have talked about in previous videos, like ls and head, are stored in this directory. The directory user local usually contains programs that you install specifically for this system. For example, if I wanted to install a new text editor, it would probably be installed somewhere in user local. The var directory is another important directory that contains subdirectories. Var log contains all the system log files. The main system log is var log syslog. If you are troubleshooting a program with your system, this would be the log file to check for errors. As you can see, there are many more directories listed, but you won't usually need to work with them. Don't worry if you feel confused about all of these directories. The more you use Linux, the more familiar you will become with these directories and their contents.